Hello, so welcome to episode 1 of my foundation series. I've done a similar series but on concealer, so if you haven't seen that, I will link it here. I believe that was like probably last summer, so it's been quite a while. But this time around, we're going to be talking about foundations. So it's going to be 5 episodes about 5 different foundations, and they range from drugstore to like mid-range. And we'll talk about how they wear and how I apply them and show you guys actually how I apply them and then give you my final thoughts. So in today's episode, we are going to be doing a buy or beware on the Wet n Wild PhotoFocus Stick Foundation. I did jot some notes about this foundation. I actually have it on my iPad, so if you see me looking down, that is what I am looking at. Just for fun, I even also drew a little drawing of the foundation stick. But this is, like I said, the Wet n Wild PhotoFocus Stick Foundation. And I've tried a few of the PhotoFocus products from Wet n Wild, and for the most part, I have been relatively happy with most of them. They have a really great PhotoFocus eyeshadow primer. They have a liquid PhotoFocus foundation, which I've heard is really nice, but I haven't actually tried it for myself. I bought the PhotoFocus Stick Foundation probably during the height of summer, so obviously quite a few months now, and I have been wearing it, just not probably as regularly as some other bases that I've used. I'm going to give you guys a bit of a background on this product before we do our application and wear test, but this is obviously from the drugstore, so I picked it up from Walmart and it was around $9 or $10. It really just depends probably where you pick this up, and I'm in Canada, so of course I pay a little bit higher prices than if you were to pick this up from like a CVS or a Walmart in the States. It does come in 21 shades. I am in the shade Golden Honey, which is supposed to be medium warm, which is typically the kind of coloring or description that I gravitate towards. I would say it is a pretty good color match. You guys will see it in action in a little bit, but it does look pretty good. Maybe I could have gone with maybe the shade darker, depending on the time of year. This does claim to have a long-lasting coverage. It's cruelty-free, fragrance-free, and it also has kind of a semi-matte finish. So before I show you guys how I apply this foundation and how it wears throughout the day, I will preface and say that I do have combination skin. I'll probably make this disclaimer in all of the videos you'll see in this foundation series, but just so that you know, I do have combination skin. I have pretty much normal skin all over except for my T-zone, which is pretty oily. I did also have some dry patches when I was testing out this foundation, so you kind of will see how it wears and applies over that. So without further ado, let's go into the application and wear test. This is my bare face. I don't have any primer on yet. We're going to use the Tatcha Silk Canvas primer though, and my face is very shiny just because of the skincare that I put on, so I have sunscreen and moisturizer and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I brought you guys in a little closer so you could see the application of this foundation. So I've used this probably 6-7 times now, and it applies a lot differently on my skin than other foundations that I've used. For whatever reason, when I swipe this on my face, it accentuates all of my pores. So I do just take the foundation stick and just swipe a couple of areas on my face and then blend it in. Do you guys see this? It's so bizarre. Normally if I swipe foundation on my face, any kind of foundation, it doesn't accentuate my pores like this, but it is really bizarre. Anyway, it usually blends out fine, but just, yeah, that initial application, you can basically see every pore I have on my face. I have just been using a damp sponge with this. I really have to get a new sponge because this one has a bunch of tears on one side. I do find this stick foundation to be a bit on the dry side. It's not as creamy as some other stick foundations that I've tried. I also don't feel like it's full coverage. It's definitely more of a medium. You'll notice that when I'm applying this, I'm not really using a pouncing technique. It's more of a swiping. I just find that the formulation is doesn't really blend as nicely. If you pounce, it definitely blends better when you kind of swipe around. You can see here how it has reduced the redness, but you can still see a bit of some darkness peeking through from some dark spots. So I'm just going to apply a little bit more just so you can see how it layers. And again, it still does that weird application where it showcases all of my pores. So like I said, this is in the shade Golden Honey, and I do find the shade to be a pretty decent match. It is a little bit more on the warm yellow tone, which I tend to fall under, and I'll bring you guys a little closer so hopefully you can see kind of how the foundation is sitting, especially like here on my forehead. I just feel like it's sitting on top of the skin. It's not quite as seamless as some other bases that I own, especially here, I guess on this side, anywhere where I've added a little bit more coverage, it just feels like it's sitting on top of the skin. I also have a dry patch right here where you can see it's kind of clinging to. I also have a bit of irritated skin here, which I tried not to put too much foundation over because it's very dry and scaly there, so nothing's really gonna stick onto it. But so that is the base done. I'm going to do the rest of my makeup and then I will come back with the finished look. So this is the finished look. It is 10 o'clock in the morning right now. The Beau and I are just about to go out and do some errands, and I'll do hopefully a check-in in the middle of the day and definitely a check-in at the end of the day. But in case you're wondering what I'm wearing, I am using the new Fenty bronzer. This is an Island Ting, and I do like it. It's a really beautiful matte bronzer. It's right up there with the Marc Jacobs Fantastic bronzer. And for powder, I did use a little bit of the Wowder just on the T-zone and under the eyes. Shouldn't affect the wear of the foundation too much. And then for highlighter, I did use the Niteshine in Platinum Rose. I'm trying to think what else I did. Glossier Boy Brow on the eyebrows, and the Glossier Lash Slick for mascara. But that is it. I'm not wearing any eyeshadow or anything like that. I haven't even put on a lip product yet. So yeah, this is the finished look, and I will show you guys how it wears throughout the day. Okay, we're gonna do a midday check-in now, and it is 3:10, which means that this base has been on for about 5 hours. So I'll bring you guys in a little bit closer so we can see how it has worn so far. I have not touched up at all today. You can see that I didn't even wipe away the grease spots on my eyelids, so there is a bit of product buildup, if you can see that, just because I do have combo skin. My eyelids are very oily, so let's just blend that back in. Hopefully you can see the dry spot that I mentioned earlier here and how the product is just sitting on top, and also how it's really clinging to the dry patches, so it doesn't look the most flattering here. I haven't noticed that the product has like built up in my smile line, so that's good. Typically that's really where the product does build up the most. In terms of the coverage on the cheek, there's still a bit of coverage. It is definitely fading a bit. My skin overall looks very shiny, especially like around the nose and on my T-zone. Overall, I feel like this foundation is just really sitting on top of the skin and it doesn't quite look very natural. I will do a blot test so we can see how oily I am and also see if I produce any more oil throughout the day. I will note that the highlighter, the Glossier Niteshine here, is not looking the most flattering right now. Usually when I wear the Niteshine, it blends really nicely over powder, over just like a regular base, but for some reason it's kind of, again, it looks like it's sitting on top of the skin. I'm going to just blot my forehead with this sheet. It's very oily. Hopefully you can see how much oil has come off on the sheet. So my skin was definitely on the oily side, and I blotted quite a bit of the oil away with this sheet. You can also see a bit of the transfer, so this is not quite transfer proof. Most of the time that can be alleviated if you set the makeup well enough, which you guys know I really just did my T-zone and under the eyes. So far after 5 hours, this is not the best foundation if you're looking for something with more oil controlling properties, but it's also probably not the worst thing I've ever tried. We're currently watching the Raptors game because playoffs have started, but I want to show you guys kind of how my skin looks in a natural light. So here is the dry patch that I was talking about earlier. Hasn't really gotten better, hasn't really gotten worse. Neither has the oils, so that's okay. Bronzer actually still looks pretty good though. So it has been around 9 hours since I first applied the base. I'm doing my final check-in now because 9 to 10 hours is typically how long I would wear a base anyway, and I want to wash my face. So you'll be pleased to know that not too much has changed since my last check-in. I still have this dry patch here. I still feel like the base is really sitting on top of the skin, and at this point it has faded, so you can see more of the redness and the blemishes that I have underneath this base. My forehead, like I showed you guys earlier, is pretty much completely bare. I mean, my oils really get the best of most foundations, and I'm typically not mad about it. You might also be able to tell a bit of the product kind of like clumping here, which is where I had sunglasses on. I'm not sure. Normally it takes away the product, but for whatever reason, it just kind of clumped some product on the bridge of my nose. But on another note, the bronzer still looks pretty good. Okay, so let's go over the pros and cons of the PhotoFocus Stick Foundation from Wet n Wild. So the first pro, I guess, is that it's inexpensive. So it's only about $9 for me here in Canada. So you can probably get this at a really good deal, depending on if you have any coupons or if there's any sales or anything like that. So it's a really great price point for any kind of makeup brand. It actually is pretty decent quality. It also comes in a good number of shades. I've always been really lucky where I kind of fit in like the medium range, and I've always been able to, in most situations, except for probably Asian brands, find a shade that suits me. But if you're looking at the spectrum of shades, they could probably add a few more deeper shades and maybe a few more paler shades, but overall, for the drugstore, it is a pretty decent shade. I would say that this is a medium coverage, so very true to its words. Definitely not a full coverage, but more than a tinted moisturizer. And overall, I didn't find that this creased, and I used it with a lot of different concealers, not just the Makeup Forever that I used in the video, but also the Smashbox and also the NARS Soft Matte Complete. And all concealers typically wore really well with this foundation, so there weren't any red flags there. For the cons, of course, it did leave my T-zone looking very oily, which is okay because it doesn't really say that it has really strong oil control properties, but if you do have an oilier skin type, then this probably isn't something that would sit well on your skin without touch-ups throughout the day. I do find that it kind of sits on top of the skin, so it just looks like you have makeup on. There's some other bases that are full coverage, but it looks really seamless, even though this is a medium coverage and you would think it would look a little bit more natural on the skin. I do find that it does sit a little bit on top of the skin, and it also clings to dry patches, which there's not a lot of foundations out there or bases that don't cling to dry patches, but if you do have drier skin, then this is something that you might not like because it will cling to any imperfections that you might have on the skin in terms of texture. So the final verdict on the Wet n Wild PhotoFocus Stick Foundation is beware. And I only say beware because it tends to be a little bit more picky, I guess, about the type of skin that you can have to wear this. So just from my experience, having kind of a mixture of different skin types and having combination skin, so oily T-zone, but then also having dry patches, wouldn't probably be great if you do have a lot of texture, and it wouldn't be great if you are really oily. So you kind of have to be like right in the middle for this to look really nice on your skin. But if you are okay with, setting your makeup throughout the day and doing touch-ups, you can probably get away with it depending on your skin type. So yeah, overall I say beware. It's also really difficult to find your shade at the drugstore when it comes to foundations like this, just because most of the time there aren't any testers, and you obviously don't want to open the packaging, although some people do, so you kind of have to hazard a guess. But I do find that the color in the bullet does reflect pretty well the shade that will be on the skins. Anyway, so those are my thoughts on the Wet n Wild PhotoFocus Stick Foundation. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Please let me know if you have ever tried this foundation and what your thoughts are, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye!